The governing All Progressives Congress and the country's major opposition parties have disputed the massive 27 billion naira voted by the federal government for the entitlements of past presidents, vice presidents, heads of state, chiefs of staff, retired heads of service, and professors in the 2025 budget. This allocation has benefited previous presidents Olusegun Obasanjo, Goodluck Jonathan, and Muhammadu Buhari, as well as former vice presidents Atiku Abubakar, Namadi Sambo, and Professor Yemi Osinbajo. While others who are projected to gain include former military heads of state, General Yakubu Gowon, retired, as well as General Abdusalami Abubakar, retired, and the former military president Ibrahim Babangida, as well as retired Chief of General Staff Commodore Ibitu Ukwiwe. Well, let's have a conversation around this matter with Dr. Ikechukwu, Public Communications and Business Strategy Consultant. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight.
Thank you.
And Merry Christmas.
I wish I could say.
Yes, so the opposition has called for greater transparency in this money that has been budgeted in 2025 appropriation. But let me ask you, do you think that this level of spending is justified for past presidents, past heads of state, chiefs of staff, and all the others on the list? Is it justifiable?
That could be a matter of perspective at two different levels. What's the practice globally with leaders? American presidents are addressed as presidents when they leave office. The same applies all over the world. So somebody might raise the question, why should you retain the title when you're no longer in office? And also, is the practice globally to have some kind of provision to maintain the modern aristocracy, if you like. Once you've held office, you become a reference, you're not allowed to drop to a certain level of material discomfort. So when PDP is calling for transparency, I don't know what they mean, because if an amount has been stipulated and those who are to get it are stated, I thought one of the questions perhaps some people might raise is, okay, you recall that some governors became senators after serving as governors, and we're receiving what the entitlements they approved for themselves while still being governors.
Yes.
I would think, or I should think that part of the worry would revolve around the question of whether a former military head of state, for instance, who is getting his full entitlements as a general or a retired general, a lieutenant general or major general, whether that should also go simultaneously along with entitlement as president. I thought they would raise the questions of governance, propriety. Yes, many of the coups that occurred in this country were really, some of them out of genuine concern, depending on the people's understanding of what they thought was good for the nation. But the other question has also arisen. Somebody who took over headship of the nation without consultation and at gunpoint, should he be entitled to things like that? I think those are some of the ethical issues we might raise. But the provision extending the list, if indeed it turns out that I, a former general, I'm not receiving entitlements as a general, but I'm receiving entitlements as a former head of state, no matter how I became that, one can easily live with that. But if you match both, it will present something that people will always find disconcerting, that you're having those two entitlements. And there's also the subliminal awareness, whether we admit it or not, that all the people mentioned, all the names mentioned, all the offices are extremely wealthy people, whether that's true or not. And without questions raised about their source of wealth before just because they were public. So I don't know whether that's a very wonderful thing to put in front burner at this time.
Indeed, because, you're right. I was just looking up, in the United States, there is an act, the former President's Act of 1958, which allows some form of entitlement to former presidents of the United States. But when you look at our climb, although we say we copy the democracy of America, shouldn't seeking elective office be a voluntary act of service? When you look at millions of Nigerians grappling with food insecurity, inflation, crumbling healthcare system, you begin to wonder why we are budgeting such huge amount of money to this category of people. Should we be looking for a policy overhaul or put a cap on the amount we give to them?
You see, when we approach it like that, it will seem as if we're trying to convince ourselves that there are clear paradigms about anything today in the nation. There are none. Some governors have approved all kinds of things for themselves, and they're aware of it. A house of 200 million in Abuja, another one in state capital, new vehicles every 4 months, a gardener, all of that, and some for his wife. Because they had the existing capacity, laws were made and passed in connivance with the National Assembly, with the Assembly, by a clique that felt the need to protect their interests. But speaking objectively on the matter of entitlements, in my place they say that the loins, the waist of somebody had grown old enough to cover himself should not be allowed to be seen naked in the village square. So if somebody has held a certain position, even in order to maintain the, if you like, the social control associated with that office, you don't allow a former visible, highly visible person who held public responsibility to drop to a certain level. But you also know that, you also have noted that people who have also held that responsibility, who are very mature, do not take the title as something you see them enter buses and all of that, but doesn't remove that level of comfort.
Yeah.
So my take is that first, there are international precedents. Second, if you look at that amount of money, convert it to dollars. It doesn't mean anything whatsoever. If anything, it's a major loss. Like people are talking about the budget. I had some commentators saying the budget was too much. Now, at the time the naira was 9 naira to the dollar, what would be the equivalent of 200-something billion or 1 trillion, etc. So whereas we are spending less in substantive terms, we're under the illusion we are spending more, whether in education or the rest of it. Coming around to this matter of, okay, can anything be done? First, there's global hardship, economic hardship. One of the most hidden nations as we speak and the most indebted is the US. So there's hunger in the land. When people advance an argument like this based on the fact that some people are hungry, I become a little mischievous by saying there will always be hungry people. Okay. But that's different from saying become insensitive. I find it a little difficult to move to the step of saying, oh, this is an insensitive gesture. Those are some of the paradoxes. That's why it's a bit difficult, you see, and that's why I think PDP, I may be mistaken, I may not be perceiving their position on this matter correctly. I think PDP should occasionally miss an opportunity to say something so that what it will say will be somewhat richer. So silence is golden? No, well, golden, but pick an issue, be somewhat detailed about it. Don't let it be, oh, recorded, we'll post this. Imagine that they took this thing, gave a detailed analysis. This is what the government has budgeted for this number of people. This is why we think they are not entitled to it. There's not even an argument. It's just the fact of having mentioned it. You know, so it could be tidier than what they are presented. And I'm not surprised that there hasn't been too much of a response to it. But the issue, which for me must remain on the front burner, is that there's a lot of poverty, hunger, and insecurity in the land. People have been trampled to death because they are struggling for rice. And the issue is, somebody had also said it's because there's my telephone, they are calling them, those who shouldn't come eventually came. But the point is this: if you and I get a phone call to come and share something, and we have no need for it, we won't go anywhere. Indeed, that's a valid fact. We shouldn't paper that down. So yeah, that's the thing about the angle from the PDP. And finally, I mean, just let me ask you, do you think that the government itself should also be providing some clarity to these budgeted monies? Because over the years, we've heard how our budgeting process has been shrouded either in secrecy or so many controversies. Is it a matter of the lawmakers or the executive itself or the people should know what the monies are budgeted for and how they are being spent? I mean, should this be making the headline? It's important that whatever money is budgeted, we should know what is budgeted for. But going beyond that, being told what is budgeted for is not the same thing as saying that it will be spent on it. And I'll give an example I've had to give in the past. Usually when we talk about budget scrutiny, issues of transparency and the rest of it, the attention is on capital expenditure most of the time, rarely on recurrent. And that's why you have agencies that will have close to, assuming they are, just hypothetically, assuming their monthly salary bill ought to be 200 million, you find that they are spending 380 million for people that don't exist, and they cost across practically every ministry and agency. And famous ghost workers? ghost workers invented by those who manage the system. That's on one side. On another side, you have the detailed budget you've gone to defend. Nobody looks at your current. Okay, here is a ministry that has put, say, 300 million for diesel to maintain the generator.
Yes.
And the agency doesn't have a functioning generator, and nobody. So a lot is under the table.
Okay.
It becomes the norm, and to that extent, a lot of things are difficult to control. But the final note on that is, the call for transparency is important. People monitoring is important. The content of the budget, for those who are activists, who wait until a budget comes out, then they start screaming and won't allow anybody to sleep.
Yeah.
They should do some more work. Preemptive engagement, before the thing becomes public, you have a position on it. Don't just isolate things and scream, but each thing you isolate and scream about, give a detailed suggestion on what to replace it, and also possibly implementation strategies for replacement. Then activism and opposition become part of national development.
Very well said, and that's a good place to anchor this conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Ikechukwu, Public Communications and Business Strategy Consultant, for your time.